Hello and welcome to Emerald Exchange Orchestrated Intelligence Decoded. I'm Richelle Carey. The question banks are grappling with is no longer whether to modernize, it's whether the operating model they're modernizing into is the right one and whether they're moving fast enough for it to even matter. Behind every banking transformation, there are two forces at work: the technology that makes it possible and the organizational model that makes it sustainable. Data and AI don't just change what banks can do, they change how banks have to be built. To explore what rewriting the operating model of banking actually looks like, I'm joined by a leader at the forefront of that work inside FIS, Don Duet, Chief Enterprise Technology Officer. Don, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Okay, the phrase AI native seems like it's everywhere now, right? From an enterprise technology standpoint, what does it actually mean to build an AI native operating model for a company at the scale at FIS, not just technologically, right?
Sure.
Structurally, what does this mean?
Yeah, it's a very important thing. And I think particularly in businesses that are highly regulated, like many of our clients and ourselves, it's going to be, one of the most important things that institutions take on. And I think, for us, it certainly starts first and foremost with a very strong and comprehensive governance process. If you think about AI, it touches everything from, all of our different businesses through to just, what's an appropriate use of it, to how do you make it safe and controllable, to how do you ensure that it's continuously managed properly as you work through the entire life cycle of AI. And so, as you said, it's really not a technology problem where we start. It's really starting with how do we build, design, and implement a comprehensive governance program across the firm so we can evaluate all aspects of AI, how it's being used, how it's being built in a way that's safe for our customers and ultimately is successful for ourselves as well.
That's a monumental task.
It's not easy to do. It's a lot easier to say.
Yeah.
So I think, and it really needs to be done in a way that's truly integrated across the firm. So from revenue through to product teams, through to our operations groups, through to our legal compliance, and of course our risk teams. Needs to be comprehensive, and it can create, obviously, as you can imagine, a certain sense of maybe bureaucracy. And so how do you basically do
stress
that?
or anxiety.
Or stress and anxiety, and how do you kind of make that work efficiently is a big part of our focus. And as we start, moving from just governance to actually building, deploying, and designing AI solutions, then we really also begin to shift the governance piece into what becomes, much more of how do we bring those controls and those requirements into the actual runtime on the network into real as we're running AI, in addition to the governance.
Okay, we're going to talk about governance again in just a moment, but most technology transformations fail not because of the technology per se, right? It's an organizational thing, as we're touching on, right? So what does the operating model of a genuinely AI native enterprise actually look like? And how is it different from how financial technology companies have traditionally been structured? There's push-pull between this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, first off, I think that, I think generally speaking, the world is discovering this as we all begin to embrace these technologies. And I think that, there's going to be a while before people come back and say, well, this is what it means to be fully AI native. I do believe, though, that it's very clearly bounded or grounded in some fundamental differences and change. So I think a lot of the financial technology companies in the past would have looked at controls as being, more when you make changes, do you then apply controls, make sure that things are working into, much more of a continuous process. So as you're continuously building, maintaining, changing, that's all integrated into where compliance, where the control processes around quality are just embedded, completely
as opposed
into
to
how you
after
do.
the fact.
Exactly. Not an after the fact process, not something that you do at a point in time before you release to your customers, but, really kind of just needs, ultimately foundationally aligned with how you're creating your services, how you're delivering those services, and how you're deploying them for your customers.
So data is described as the competitive moat in financial services, right? Banks are sitting on decades of transaction data that they either can't or haven't fully accessed, haven't activated. What does it actually take to turn that data from a storage problem into a legit strategic asset?
It's a hard problem. I think I would even start with, data is incredibly important to AI. So, clearly the well-operating AI solutions are directly correlated to having data that's correct, that's timely, that's being kind of delivered in motion versus delivered in batches. And so, that whole real-time aspect, it's critical. When we look at the data environment, one of the great things we think about FIS is that we are hosting so much of our customers' information in all the systems of records that we offer them. And so it gives us a very unique position to be really helping with this challenge of how do you take that data, how do you, often written, developed, and managed in a very bespoke manner for the particular product that it's on, and how do you help kind of surface that information in ways that you can make sense out of it, that you can actually think of being like at a semantic level where you can ask questions of your data that you and I can speak to very simply, but when you go down into the different data models, they may have just a very different definition of identity or account or how that's working. So that's a big part of what we're very much focused on, is both how do we build and deploy internally a data architecture that allows us to access that information with control and with appropriate, kind of capabilities. And then how do we bring that up to where we can start making sense of it? We can actually build that kind of semantic layer that allows us to take all these different concepts, which you can all as people agree and speak to, but then, wire that down to the individual ways that the data has been deployed in each of these systems.
And so it's not just the data, it's making the data be integrated and actually make sense.
Exactly. Yeah. I think you'll hear a lot about the intelligence layer and the orchestration layers as people talk about AI. And it's, data is like inherently critical as part of both of those, and that ability to really kind of be able to take existing data that's going to be, having been built in its raw form into very different kind of design for an application purpose, and converting that to where it can now be used for a human purpose or an agentic AI purpose, which is more operating at that concept semantic layer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Agentic AI.
Agentic AI.
I know this keeps some executives up at night, right? So let's just make sure everyone is clear what we're talking about. Systems that autonomously act on behalf of users, right? So that's a new set of governance risks, right? And risk questions, rather. How do you think about the right guardrails for AI in making those decisions? Where does a human still need to be in the loop?
Well, I think it's, first and foremost, I think one of the things that we grapple a lot with as we're building, AI-based solutions is part of, sometimes AI should be used in an agentic form where it's truly making decisions. It's doing what we would call non-deterministic analysis. But there's a lot of places where we're using AI to build more deterministic solutions. It allows us to just scale that much faster. So being able to create things like, if you have a relatively mature set of rules as to what should be considered safe versus non-safe or correct or incorrect in places, well, that's a great place to use AI to generate more of a piece of software that can deterministically, answer, is this good or bad, or is this right or wrong? But as we move into agents, and I think as the world really kind of pulls above the traditional automation that we've done historically into where now it's reasoning, it's making decisions like one of your employees would have, that's kind of where we're focused a lot on. And I think the entire industry is focused on, how do you do that in a way that's going to be successful, in a way that's going to avoid the challenges. So really thinking about the harnesses, the types of guardrails, the types of policy that you'll need to have. And I don't think we start from scratch, because in most of our businesses, you have people doing these tasks, and those tasks, they have obviously well-defined, what is the acceptable things for someone in treasury operations to be doing? What are the rules that they follow as they do their job? So you start with a basis of knowledge that becomes important. That knowledge can be converted into data form that it's agent friendly, so the agents can start using that same set of rules. But as we kind of progress even higher and higher, this is where it just becomes very important from an architecture perspective to ensure that where you're using agents or anything that you're providing agency to has a designed-in set of capabilities to ensure that it's being validated. It may not be one agent operating alone. It may be an agent that's doing the planning of tasks and then handing that to a collection of agents that do more individual tasks. And those individual tasks can have an overseer agent that's checking to make sure whatever they do before it gets done is actually correct. And so I think there's a lot of really interesting work that's going on, and a lot of design of how we make this successful and how we balance the benefits of agency and agentic AI with, ensuring that there's very strong explainability, control, and fundamentally guardrails in the process.
All right. If you are just joining us, I'm Richelle Carey, and this is the Emerald Exchange. I'm here with Don Duet, the Chief Enterprise Technology Officer. We're talking about how data, AI, and scale are reshaping financial institutions. Okay, Don. So let's talk about FIS serves institutions across a huge spectrum and scale, right? Global banks, regional banks, community banks. How do you build technology infrastructure that works at the largest scale, right, without making it inaccessible or unaffordable for institutions on the other end of the spectrum?
I think this is one of the most important, values that FIS can create. I mean, on one hand, we aggregate a lot of the complexity across small, regional banks, community banks, all the way up to the largest financial services companies in the world. And so it's not a simple task, but obviously, as we're doing this and we're engineering for the needs of the biggest and the largest and the most scalable, by default, we're just creating a value proposition for those that may not have the same set of needs, that we're almost democratizing some of the technologies that would otherwise been much more difficult to gain access to, because we can build those for the most complex firms, and then we can offer that as capabilities for the firms that are on their path to becoming, hopefully, among the largest and most complex. And so I think it's actually a very important part of the role that FIS plays here in the banking system.
The word that I've been hearing a lot across Emerald Exchange is trust. It sounds like what we're describing is having a really trusted relationship with your clients, no matter the size. How do you? It's almost like you kind of coach them through something that is so new and huge and big.
Yeah, I think it is for me. I think it is the most important competitive moat that FIS should have and does have. I think that ability to be a trusted provider in something as changing as fast as AI, and has so much opportunity to do great good, but also has a lot of potential to, if misused, to do a lot of things that are not as good. Then I think that's a huge part of what we aspire to be as an organization. And I think part of what we definitely are continuing to do as we build and we learn ourselves how to master these technologies is being very open with our clients and really helping provide for insights into what we've learned, the practices we're evolving, how we've tackled hard problems, making that more available. Because I think at the end of the day, as you said, every enterprise in the world is going to be going through some degree of a transformation as part of this. And I think, but beyond just purely providing the products and solutions that could help with that, we can also provide a lot of advice and learning and expertise.
So if you step back and look at FIS, over the next 5 years, what do you see as the North Star for how FIS needs to build technologically over the next 5 years? How is this journey going to go?
Well,
how
5 years is a long time. At the pace that we're changing and the world is moving. It's a big,
okay, how about just next week?
But no, I think, next week, I think that one of the things that, we are very focused on as FIS is becoming much more of a platform company. And what I mean by that is ensuring that as people work, as clients and our partners work with us, that they have the ability to, log in once, get access to all the solutions that we serve, make it simple to consume, make it simple to get, to understand how to use those systems. So it's a long way from where we are today. But it's a big part of where we are focused. And we hear a lot from our clients as to the challenges sometimes of, working with us. And that's an area we're investing very actively in. But I think that view of saying, can we become more of a platform provider where we can deliver this very eclectic set of capabilities and services, but feel like it's one firm, one way to interact with us. Data is a perfect example. AI, I believe, will be a perfect example. These are going to force that collapsing anyway. Like, people are going to not want to go to 15 different AI agents. They're going to not want to go to, get data in 100 different places. They're going to want to have convenience and simplicity. And, that's a big part of where we're investing, with that mindset of becoming more of a uniform platform for our customers and to build ourselves and deliver ourselves in that manner. It's a big task. But
are you excited?
I'm super excited by it. I really think that our ability to not just, as we mentioned before, not just provide great products and solutions, but to really be a catalyst for change and for safe adoption of these technologies is a big part of, I think, what our mission will be. And that's, to me, it's like, that's an awesome. I've been in finance for a very long period of time. And I really do think we have a lot we can offer that's going to be very valuable for our customers and for our partners.
Don, it's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. We've been talking with Don Duet of FIS in a conversation that goes right to the heart of what the future of banking infrastructure actually looks like. To explore more of forces reshaping financial services and how the world's leading institutions are responding, join me for more episodes of Emerald Exchange, and thank you for joining us.